Be quick. No, wait, well, we have 7 viewers. We have Jake. We have Jason. We have Alex. And yep, it looks like we are live. We're live, we're live, we're live. What's up, everybody? This is John from Coding Addict, and welcome to another Power Hour live stream. As always, I'm joined by one and only Mr. Paul Bratlovsky, the mastermind behind the YouTube channel Coding After 30. Again, Paul's channel is Coding After 30. How are you, Paul?
Very good. How are you? How are your holidays?
Awesome. Awesome. The holidays were awesome. Released the Mern course. That was a big one. So that's kind of, I'm still doing a little bit of editing I need to finish, but in general, yeah, that's good. So one of the things that I'll do after Mern, I'll like spend a day or so to research how to put this one up as a podcast.
Yep.
So we will be on a different channel as well. Uh, did you make any New Year's resolutions?
No, because every time I've in the past made a New Year's resolution, it just never comes to fruition. So I just decided that you just got to do the best that you can. I mean, I have goals, but I don't want to say it's a New Year's resolution. I want to I have this like 90-day plan, you know, uh, like that I'm on, but that has nothing to do with New Year's. Uh,
But is it
so
for like work or like personal growth or
It's
working out?
combination of yeah, it's like exactly. It's combination of like in 90 days, what I want to accomplish at my job, what do I want to accomplish for my health, like weight wise, because I'm kind of heavier than I should be, and then also financially where I want to be, like what path do I have, and just like and what I like about 90 days, it's not like super long that if you put work and steps into it, you could see yourself making positive changes in that direction, and it's like kind of like realistic enough to be like, okay, I'm going to try this plan for 90 days. And then you could also um, you know, self correct if you have to, or course correct. And the way I got this number, 90 days, is because I was listening to this guy talking who is a therapist of some sorts. And he literally says, you could take anybody in any position and you could put him on a 3 month path. And if they do their best within like their reason, like they could make life changing changes. You might not get to your goal, but you will see that trajectory. And I was kind of like, that's kind of interesting because it's like, sometimes people sit somewhere for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, and nothing happens. And it's like, maybe you're not putting a good plan into path. And I'm like, that 90 days, it's like maybe you're not going to get to your goal, but you should see hints that you're moving in a positive direction. So I was like, yeah, you know what? I'll do 90 days and see what happens.
No, that's actually a very good idea because that way at least you're not literally like if you have, let's say, plan for 1 year and then at the end of the 1 year it comes out that it was a wrong plan. Like
Yeah.
90 days gives you pretty much at least an idea whether you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. And it's also like that show, 90 Day Fiance. So, have you ever seen that show?
No.
Don't do it. It will get you sucked into this world of 90 Day Fiancés. And what's funny was like, I was watching that show with a friend of mine, and he like kind of made a joke, like it's kind of you and your fiance. I'm like, no, we're gonna do things differently, and sure enough, that's the only way for us to do it. So, like, I should like literally see if I could get on their show, 90 Day Fiance, because
I assume that that's daytime TV, correct?
yeah.
Yeah,
So
speaking of that, so if you want to check out some cool content, like live streams where maybe Paul is going to talk about the 90 Day Fiancés, be sure to check out Paul's channel, Coding After 30. And while you're there, be sure to smash that like button and help win our algorithm. As you can see, we have new time and not date. Date also, but the date is always going to be changing. But yeah, we have Fridays right now at 6 o'clock Pacific time. So hopefully, at least from my part, I should be a little bit more active. So like took 2 coffees today just to be like like no 3 coffees actually just to be
that's
more active and everything. And it's also not for Paul. It's not 11 o'clock, so it also should be better for everyone.
yeah,
Um,
it's perfect time, perfect time.
yeah, I think this is gonna be way better. Let me quickly double check. Yeah, so we have yeah, we have pretty much all the usual crew. So
Nice.
it looks like we didn't lose too many people, which is really, 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 really awesome. Uh, okay, as far as the weekly tips and fails, I have this really interesting. Did you know that Git does not care about the casing? Let's say I create folder in whatever components folder, and initially I make it with capital case, and then once I change it to lowercase, did you know that Git doesn't care about that stuff?
No, I didn't know. I had no idea. That's
Okay.
weird.
So
That
what's really interesting though is that let's say okay, imagine the React code, right? So you create React router, and then in there you create pages folder for the pages. You
yeah.
stuck them in. You get them in app.js, and you go with let's say whatever uppercase first, and then at the very end you change it to lowercase. Now all is fine and dandy, but the thing is, uh, when you push this up to the GitHub, and let's say it goes to Netlify, your code is changing when, let's say, you change the import from uppercase to lowercase in your code, right? So let's say if you switch the name, you do that. Otherwise,
Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah,
code
yeah,
will
yeah,
break.
yeah. You have, yeah, right.
So, but since Git does not care about that, when the code arrives at Netlify, Netlify throws the error where it says, "Hey, look, you didn't like. I mean, I'm looking for this folder and I cannot find it." And
Oh
I
my gosh.
spent another again. It wasn't too bad because I kind of right away went to research. But this was one of those weird ones where you're like, okay, listen, it just worked a minute ago. It works locally. Everything is fine, and it
Right.
simply doesn't work because Git does not care. And I like the fact that in the official Netlify blog, instead of just making it really difficult, the solution is very straightforward. Remove the folder, commit the changes. So then Git basically is going to push it without the folder. Then obviously rename the folder as well, or keep it if you already
Yeah.
rename it, and then just put it back. There's no like
No, no.
obviously you can go with some weird Git commands, but they're like, look, this is the fastest one, and I'm like, this is on the official Netlify blog, and I'm like,
Yeah,
okay.
that's funny.
So
That's funny.
yeah,
That's
that's for me. Is if you're changing folder names, be very careful if you have the continuous deployment where your code will change, but Git does not care about the folders. That's for me. What about you? Any hot tips?
well, I have like two now that I think about it. Like one is like as you mentioned me coding live on my stream. So last stream I was coding live and I wrote the code and in it was correct with a minor mistake. And I was like literally was stuck and couldn't figure out what I was doing. And it was basically, you know how you sometimes pass your config and it's an object and that object has a bunch of things.
Yep.
So the second thing that I needed to add should have been inside that same object, but I put it outside of the object. But to me on the screen, because I was so tired, it all looked the same. And so I literally spent an hour being like, why the hell this is not working? Why it's not throwing like a crazy error? And everybody's like, you got it. And I'm like, I'm doing the thing. What the hell? But sometimes it's like super silly stuff. So I keep coming back to this thing, walk away and come back to it tomorrow with a fresh set of eyes. Because as soon as I opened the code, like the next day, I was like, oh my God, I spent an hour on this. Are you kidding me? That was so embarrassing. So that's number one. And number two, like because at my job where I'm working, I'm working with like certain like specific technologies, once is like GraphQL, Strappy, React, whatever it is. And sometimes like you get these questions or assignments that you even yourself don't know how to do. And so what happens is I end up kind of have to take a break and research the topic and figure it out. And so what I started doing preemptively now, it's like, okay, at work, I really have to be familiar with like GraphQL and the way it interacts with React or Strappy. Like, and Strappy is a big one for me. So every day I just read the Strappy documentation for an hour based on the thing that I'm trying to do at work. So I'm preemptively going into the documentation because I realized that before I was like doing stuff and until it was breaking, I didn't know if it was the right way or not. And what I discovered reading the documentation, some of these things people already tried. And so they'll show you some of the gotchas that you might have. So I basically, my new thing now, when I wake up and have my coffee for like an hour, I'll just read something specific to my work in terms of learning and studying. And it's been helping me tremendously. And also, you're constantly learning. And so that's like my other pro tip is there's never a dull moment, but that's something that has been helping me a lot recently.
But let's say the resources. Do you? I mean, you obviously already know kind of what you're working on, but do you use like you search for blogs? Do you just
Yeah, yeah.
go? Yeah, blogs.
Yeah,
So
so I'll search like literally the topic, and I'll start at the documentation, and then I also have another tab open where I'll look at blogs and I kind of like cross reference or see like kind of help me to get bigger context of what like I'm doing in the documentation. Yeah, so searching like Stack Overflow blogs and the documentations. And rarely what I do, like I don't watch videos at all, because watching a video like I want my hour to be productive, and it's just way easier to skim through text and get to the point. With a video, it's very difficult to do. But interestingly enough, there's this one issue I was having where the docs was like, I don't know if they made a mistake, but the JSON file they had for the config was wrong, and I would have never figured this out until I was literally like looked everywhere all over the net, and it was this one YouTube video I found, which was like connecting Google Storage Cloud to Strapi, and it was not even it was like in Italian, and I literally watched the video in Italian, and then I'm like, oh wait a second, this config file looks different, and I go to the docs. I'm like, why in the docs it looks wrong? So I basically, structured my config like he did, and it worked. And I was like, oh my god! From all the places, find a video that the only one video on the topic in Italian, and I was like, you know what? Good, good. It got me the answer.
I
So
definitely wouldn't have went down the rabbit hole. If I would have seen that it's in the town, I probably would have never like even went.
I just stumbled on it. I stumbled on it. I was just like, oh, this doesn't sound like English, but I was already committed. So
And actually, to add to your first point, this is like very interesting for me. Like, I can honestly say that each and every time when I decide to skip my lunch, let's say to fix, as I'm working on something, or stay up later to fix something, every time, 100%, I regret that because every time, like, I cannot solve it in, like, let's say I skip a lunch and then I work for those next 2 3 hours, whatever. And the moment I go down and start, like, let's say playing with my daughter, I'm like, I know where's the problem, right? The moment you step away. And so this is very, very big. Like, if you're really hitting something, I mean, I always just like you said, just walk away. Especially if you're tired. Because you're just kind of hitting all the like dead ends, and it's not really productive. So I definitely agree with that point.
another thing that I like read, like I'm always like curious, is there like a good way to study? Is there like the secret formula? So I read a lot of these like learn how to study type of books and stuff. And then there's one which talked about, if you want to help yourself to recall something after you learn something, take a nap. So obviously I'm not going to take a nap in the middle of the day, but what I just started to do, I started reading a little bit like for 15-20 minutes right before I go to sleep. And what's interesting, not all the time, sometimes I'll actually dream about code, which is weird. But the next day I wake up, like I feel like I thought about it in my sleep. It's like I when I think of it, I think it like my understanding seems to make more sense. And I don't know like how much truth is it in it. I'm sure there's something to it because there were studies done about this. But I was like, oh, like let me. So I started doing that a lot. It's like I'll read a little bit before sleep.
As
You
far
know,
as what I've read in productivity books, it's because brain basically you let the brain do the work for you. So instead of
perfect.
pushing that, then I know that my wife went basically her that's her approach of studying. She always like she does it in the evening where she's like reading, and then she goes to sleep. And she says that she
Nice.
went through the nursing school with all, and she that's her like kind of approach. So I definitely can attest to that. That it's not for me because I'm usually as I'm reading I fall asleep, so
Yeah.
I need to be kind of very careful with that. But in general, that is a very good approach. All right, and as far as our main theme this week, we've got make your own decisions, and this one is going to be pretty fast, and it's again one of those tips that we initially recorded, and it simply comes down to the fact that something already, by the way, we already discussed previously in our live streams, where there's going to be so many opinions, and bunch of them are made just for clickbait. I mean, let's just call it as it is. That I, I mean, if I can give a suggestion, I always say, look, you need to like listen to a lot of things, but at the same time, the end decision comes to you, right? So whether you want to use Redux, whether you want to, again, I can do the laundry list of things, whether you want to structure your application in a certain way, whatever. To me, it comes always down to it's always interesting to see how other people work, but at the end of the day, I need to see whether that makes sense for me. I can give you an example. When you work with styled components, a pretty popular approach is creating pretty much everything as styled component. Now, for me, it just doesn't make sense. I like my way setting up, and of course, if I were to work for some company that has some kind of style, of course, I'm not going to come in there and start telling them how to do it. Like, I need to pay my bills, but when it comes to my personal project, you know, like go with the flow that makes the most sense for you, not just because I don't know Paul, John, or Wes Boss said it. Like it's very good to always like don't be kind of arrogant and think that you know the best, right? So always be open minded where you're like, okay, maybe I didn't think this one through, but also don't be kind of just blindly following because I mean, if you're doing that, then you're kind of doing yourself a disservice because you're the one who's going to be working on that application. That's pretty much. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. And like one thing, like I said many times, that kind of wastes a lot of my time is because I kept chasing the new hottest topic some YouTuber was talking about. And here I am, and here you are, we're on YouTube talking about stuff. But what I like about you, you're talking about the fundamentals, the basics, and the like technologies you talk about. They're all like they're the things that are in demand. You're like kind of like you're not even like people always ask you when is this going to come out, when is that going to come out, and you're like, no, I'm going to stick to making these courses because this is what is now in demand, this is the basic, this is something that's going to prepare you to understand the topic better. And but there's a lot of people that just like, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that, that like web, like assembly, it's going to kill JavaScript, and you hear all these things and you kind of like you're like, maybe it's true, and you jump from one thing to another thing to another thing, and you waste so much time and you're not learning anything. And so for me, like when I started making progress is when I decided, instead of listening to others telling me what to do, I am going to make a decision based on my understanding. And you talked about this and I talk about this. Just look up job searches in your area and see what is the common tech stack and then learn it. You don't have to like listen to everybody on YouTube. Like there's nothing wrong with people talking about it, but you have to understand people on YouTube, they're content creators and they get paid based on views, right? And your channel is different because you have courses. That's your main business. So you don't make that type of content, right? Because you don't need views. You have like a business that you run and you happen to have part of that business on YouTube. Where if you're a YouTuber, if you don't make these YouTube videos and they don't get clicks and they don't get views, even if the information is not relevant to people, they're going to make it because they want to make stuff that makes them money and makes them views, and that's kind of why I like your channel and why I like my channel is that I only talk about my experience. And like you kind of like talk to me like, Paul, like, why aren't you making these videos? Like, we recorded this video. Why aren't you putting it? And and I agree with you, but my main priority is be a better developer at my job. And so the YouTube channel is secondary, even though I do need to spend more time on it. But because I'm not a YouTuber, I'm a developer, and that's what you do, you know what I mean? And so the biggest waste of time is basically trying to follow what is in vogue on YouTube, and it's not going to get you anywhere. You need to. And so, long story short, until I made the decision to pick my own path based on the technologies that people were hiring in Austin, Texas, I didn't make any progress. And so I literally just said to myself, I'm not going to do anything that's not React related at all until I get a job. And I committed to that plan. And I've been working as a developer almost 4 years now. So like that's what I recommend to people is set your plan, make your own decisions, because at the end of the day, like you, John, me, Paul, or any other YouTuber, we're not going to take care of your family. We're not going to pay your bills. It's up to you. And so don't put your future in somebody else's hands.
Actually, to add on this one, I saw on you were on live stream, and again, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, but he has bald head and he's jujitsu purple belt, I believe.
Oh yeah. Like Dorian Codes or whatever that guy. Yeah.
Yes, I think. So anyway, the reason why I'm saying that because he made I guess he's doing now more YouTube videos, but he made
Yeah.
actually a very good one about the, I believe it was Google certifications, where he
Yeah.
literally went down the road and he showcased that everybody who suggests you do certifications in order to make 100,000 or whatever dollars actually they don't know anything about it. You
No.
can clearly see that they're just
Yeah.
copying from one to, and this is a clear example of, like, again, I don't want to throw everybody who does YouTube videos in the same pot, but again, it goes like to that point where you need to kind of be mindful, because not just because it's on internet, it doesn't mean that it's true.
Yeah. And so, like, there's a YouTuber, lead code, not lead code, god damn it, tech lead, and he's a very smart guy. He worked at Facebook, whatever, but he found his niche because he's like pretty sarcastic, and he's kind of trolling YouTube. If you understand that, you're not going to get mad at him. But the type of videos, and for a while he did a lot of coding content because that was popular, and it was around that, and then he realized that the crypto search on YouTube right now is so popular that he switched his
Hmm.
content all around crypto because, again, even though he's the tech lead and whatever and works for X, Google X, whatever, he wants to get the views because he makes his money through creating content. And that's why all his content now is all about crypto. And then he even created his own like crypto coin because that's his job, right? And that's why he gives that opinion. And like I just heard another tech YouTuber, Joomla, I guess he quit Google because he wanted to pursue YouTube because his YouTube channel at a point where, and he enjoys making content and he wants to make more videos, where his YouTube income is more than what he was making at his job, which is amazing. And so that's the thing that people have to keep in mind is that YouTubers, and like I said, I don't want to put everybody in the same goal, but it's a business. And if you're only doing content creation, you want to make a content around topics that are popular on YouTube, but doesn't mean that they're relevant for you to actually getting hired or getting a job. You might think that, but there's a very small, like, like I said, like I have a friend who jokes around with me because he knows I'm on YouTube. But he's my developer friend. He goes like, "What do you call a failed developer?" And he's like, "A YouTuber." I'm like, "That's not funny, bro." But the point is, that's when like he made that joke enough times that I'm like, you know what? I'm a developer first, and I want my income at my job go up, not through my YouTube. And if YouTube becomes something more, it's fine. But my main goal is to be a better programmer, and my YouTube channel, like, I don't want to like sell out in a sense that I don't want to make content for the sake of content that follows trend. I want to make content that helps people in my position who are in their 30s making a career switch, and they just want to know what to do to actually be able to get hired. And I've literally shared my plan with two people and blew my mind because one of the girls got like hired 6 months ago, and this recent girl, she got hired a couple of weeks ago, and she's like, "Paul, like your content like helped me because it helped me to understand what was important rather than trying to do whatever." And what's interesting, the first girl got a job as a React developer, and the second girl, she got a job as a Python developer. And like they're like, "Paul, you always talk about React," but yeah, like the technology doesn't matter. It's like, do you have a project? Do you have your LinkedIn? Do you have like, your GitHub set up? Do you have a good resume? Did you do those things? So there's and I know this because I had to do that to switch careers myself, and I've made a lot of mistakes. And so, like, if I could give back to someone and help somebody not waste their time, and because when you're like start turning 35, 36, going to your 40s, time is not something you have. So I don't want to waste people's time by making BS content. I just want to share like what worked for me. And if people don't listen to me, like, I don't care. Like, I'm not gonna be like, "Oh, let me change my content to make 2 3 people happy." So yeah, that's it.
Basically,
That's
you're not gonna alter your content in order
right.
just to get like few of those clicks, and that's why, yeah, it's a very very important point where, and this is something again we have talked before, where, I mean, if you really kind of, I maybe I'm using the wrong term, but dumb it down. I mean, if you really make a list of things you need to do to get hired, they're not gonna change that much from year to year, and pretty much, and this is what we're doing, we're pretty much repeating the same stuff. Look, You need to look for jobs in your area. Then you need to make the projects. Like you said, there's a laundry list of things, but they're not infinite. They're the same things, and you just need to keep pounding. And whether I come up with assembly video or not, they're not changing. It doesn't matter.
So,
This is what you
so
need to do.
my friend who's a financial advisor, he's been telling me to invest and do like certain things and financially for like all my life. I didn't listen to him until like 4 years ago, which was literally big mistake if you think about it. He started investing like since he was like 18, and he's like my age, 42. He's doing very well. And I go like, bro, you need to make a YouTube channel. He's like, for what? He's like, the things that like I do to help people make money. It's like four things. And what am I going to do? Make a video about those same four things every time? They're like really boring, very simple, but
Yeah,
they work. And he's like, and that's what I do. And it's no different. Like the stuff that gets you a job is not the exciting stuff. It's the boring stuff that you have to do to get hired. And that's what people have to understand. But you can't make videos and get views on YouTube if you talk about the boring things that work. You gotta kind of make it exciting and clickbaity. It's like, how did I get $100,000 job? Whatever. It's crazy.
yeah, no. And as far as the crypto, that's for sure. I think you'll definitely see way more. I can see people like as far as content switching more to
Yeah,
that because
a lot of people. Yeah,
it is very it's very profitable.
yeah. In terms of YouTube
Yep,
topic, like
yep.
for me, like I just want to do stuff that interests me. So if I ever were to add additional topic to like probably wouldn't do it on my channel because it makes zero sense to do, but I'm very interested in like the future of VR and like where's that going, what's going to happen in that space. Like I would do like a separate channel for that because that has nothing to do with switching careers like after 30 as a developer, but it's still code related and stuff like that. But that's like an interest I have, so I don't mind like doing that because I'm curious. But then, like, if I wanted to make money on YouTube, I would start a crypto channel, right? I just don't
Yep.
want to because it's
That
like, you
that's a
know,
money maker
yeah,
at
I just
this
want to talk
point.
about things that I like, you know?
Yeah, I think that concludes the main theme, but I do have one very important and interesting question that I want to ask you. So
Yes.
today, in my React course, I got a question, like very good question. So I showcased the context API and I also showcased the custom hooks. And basically, person was saying, well, look, context API, provides, any basically component that's in a provider can get whatever value, and but it's similar kind of to the custom hook where okay you set it in a separate file but you can still import it and whatever. So as far as your preference, let's imagine some scenario where you can either go with context API or you can set up separate hooks for toggling, for fetching user and setting it up, for I don't know, getting the product. Which one would you choose? Like if you personally, let's say, you're in a bubble and you can choose whatever you want. What would be your preference?
So, since you told me the question a little bit ahead of time, I did have some time to look into it, and um, so it's they do slightly different things. When you work with use hook, and in terms of the example of fetching data, that's fine because that's not global state that's stored in your React application. It's something you're getting from an API. So yeah, that's fine in that case. Where context, you have your global store or whatever that you could share with all the components. So you they do two different things. So um, your hook, it has that local state. Like so, when you fetch the data from, even like in your use hook, like get data, it still gets saved in that local state to that um, hook, and you can pass it to whatever you want. But it's different if you have contacts, and I don't know exactly what the difference is. And uh, but when hook re-renders or whenever data changes, it always causes a re-render.
Hmm.
And so if you have a bunch of them, uh, like it causes issues. And I don't know the details. And I'll send you a link of some articles that I saw. You could add them in the description later. Because like I was very curious of this question because I don't know enough. But basically, what I've done in the past, which seemed to be something good is to use context and hooks together.
Mm,
You
mm,
know what I
mm,
mean? And so like I've never used hooks in a sense of like using it to replace context. It just never made sense to me. And like I need to learn more about it, to be honest. Like I don't know enough, but when I think of hooks, I think of hooks as encapsulating repeatable code that you're going to reuse in multiple components. Like, so if you have a use hook, like get data form, you like hook, where basically it's a hook that you could pass to any of the form elements that you create, and you could store that form data in that hook, right?
yeah.
So that's how I look at it. It's like encapsulating the logic and moving it away. So let's say you have five forms, instead of having five different like use state for each different form, you just have a hook in one place and you just import into those forms. Where context, I think of like global state of like storing like a user, or storing um, like blog posts or whatever in one place. So to me, I feel like they're similar, but there's like that difference that I can't explain clearly yet because I myself don't understand enough. But I just feel that you can't use one or the other, but you could use both in combination, and that seems to be what a lot of people were doing. So one example I saw was someone took their provider, which had like bajillion methods, and that provider got really, really long. And what they did, took those methods and then turned them into hooks. So now those hooks could live in a different file. So their provider, context provider, now could be smaller and easier to read. And they're just calling those like, you know, use get user or use get like whatever. And so now they're able to like basically write a more concise provider, and instead of defining the methods inside the provider, they're defining them as use hooks, um, and they're able to put them in different files. At least that was one example. There's a bunch of other examples in terms of um, like one ish I can't like I don't know, like because I just recently had it and I don't know the complete cause of it. One thing with like using hooks, how do you pass data from one use hook to another? Like I don't
From
know if you tried that. Like imagine you have use hook that gets the user, and then let's say you have another use hook that's supposed to get the data based on the user that you got. You can't put two hooks next to each other and then take the result from one hook and pass it to the other.
yeah, I haven't tried that one.
Yeah, and so like, but with context, you could pass the context, use context to that hook. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, no, no, no.
So now like that eliminates that problem. I eliminated completely different way. I basically created a whole separate wrapping component. So the wrapping component got the user, and then I had another component that handles getting the post. So the first component fired the first get user whatever. I'm just using that example. And then when I got that data, I passed it to the other component as a prop, and within use that prop to pass it to that second use hook to get the post based on the user. And as just an example, but if you try to like one component and you put three hooks and you want to take a result from one hook, pass it to another, you can't do it. But you could pass context inside your hook if you wanted to.
Mm,
Or
mm, mm,
so I mean,
mm.
like I still like need to learn more about it, and I'll share the articles that I saw because I think you'll find them interesting, and you could add them to the description here. But I feel like it's not one or the other. You like they slightly do slightly different things, uh, and from a lot of the quick search that I did, it's very common to use both together.
So yeah, like you brought up so many interesting points. Like first of all, the form hook, that was the first custom hook that I ever like made. That was kind of like for me like, oh okay, so this kind of makes sense. And then the other ones, but I do want to say that for me, as far as even the preference, what I've noticed that I know that a bunch of people complain about setting up basically, at least in the beginning while you're working on it. I prefer actually setting up everything in one state in the beginning,
Yeah,
and actually, to be honest, if you have a bunch of functionality, that's for me when even the Redux makes a little bit more sense instead of setting up a bunch of context, even context. I'm not even talking about hooks,
Yeah.
because I've noticed that when you're like, okay, I had this scenario where, so I have user, log in, log out, and all that, but I want to log out when actually I'm fetching something else. And if there is a 401 error, basically authentication error, then I want to log out. And I noticed that as I was like setting up the project, I'm like, look, this is kind of, it's getting a little bit annoying where I need to drag it from another context, then I need to invoke it. So I ended up not using the Redux anyway. So I just set up everything in one and use context, meaning context. But I do see where the bunch of reducers kind of a little bit make actually sense instead of setting up a bunch of context. And I do have to say that I see like use cases for the hooks, but this sometimes I all the production applications that I've worked with, like especially when we're working with big ones, it didn't like they all make that one global, state. So a lot of times this is also this like, oh, you should be using hooks because this is the, what's the name, the performance, blah 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 blah. And I don't know, with hooks, it's a little bit there. There's some things that make sense, and there's some like I believe last time when we talked about it, you actually said it very nicely. You're like, look, at some point, it's like, are you overdoing stuff? Are you really overthinking?
Yeah.
Because it's actually like everything makes sense, and you're just making it more difficult by setting up everything in a different file, then you're importing, and then and then like you
Yeah.
said, how do you pass from one to another? So yeah,
So
that's what
what
I
I
think.
I like what you said, like anything that's global state store in context. So I never store global state in use hooks, and I don't even think of it that way. I just think of it as encapsulating repeatable chunk of code that will repeat in like 5 6 different components, but that state is local to that component. You know what
Mm,
I'm saying? So
mm,
like the use form hook is a great example. Like you don't need to store that in context for what? It's only being used where you're going to submit the form unless you're doing something tricky with it, but like you don't need. So for local state to that component, like you might have 7 different forms, and why rewrite, 7
mm.
different times
Yeah, the use
to get
states
that
and
data? Yeah,
yeah.
right. So you just encapsulate that logic
Mm,
in a
mm,
reusable use form hook, and that's a perfect example. But that's not global state, so
mm,
that has
mm,
no business being in context, and that's where I say how you can't use one or the other. Like if you have like state and your application is complex, you're not going to solve it with custom hooks. You need either context or Redux or
yeah,
some
yeah.
other state management system.
And also,
But
oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
No, no, no. I didn't want to interrupt you. The something I forgot that I wanted to say. And it's also, remember, when you're working as a team, when each person starts setting up custom hooks, I don't think it ends up really well because
Yeah,
you need
yeah.
to have some kind of structure. Sorry to interrupt your thought.
No, no, and that's 100%. I think like a couple of people had some
Mm,
uh, questions, like, and like it literally like I'm just trying to look up something. Blah 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 blah. Something about like when you're writing code, do they expect you to write code a specific way? And what I was going to say, it depends on the company. And when you work for a company, they're going to have like if you're a junior developer, you're going to have access to a code base which will have examples of like some code. And what you're going to do is literally like create other like components or whatever based on those examples. So from all the companies I've worked for, like bigger companies, they all expect you to do things a certain way. And there's a reason why you have a PR request. Like when people review your code, they're only just review the code that you wrote that it works. But a lot of companies, they have like style guides, if you will, of how they want you to structure. Like for instance, like you could handle asynchronous data with using .then, or you could use async await with try and catch. And the company that I work for, they're like, you need to make sure you write a sync function with await, make sure you put a try and catch, make sure this is where, and like they expect you to do that. So a lot of companies, especially if they're bigger companies, they do have certain expectations that you will learn when you work there. And then some places they just say like, "Does your code work?" You know, um, but there's like certain specific ways of doing things. So I thought that was a great question, and I was kind of going to bring it back to your example of, if everybody has the freedom to make custom hooks, how could people stay, you know, in sync? And so there might be someone on the team be like, look, if you have a component that shares the same logic, you have to encapsulate it in a use hook, and this is the parameters that it has to follow. Because if they don't, then people will be doing whatever they want, and it'll be a nightmare for other developers try to figure out like what's going on in the code base.
So for my part, I can say that the production applications I've worked on, I've basically the approach was following where you in that piece of component that you're trying to create or whatever, you can do, I wouldn't say whatever you want, but more or less. But like when it comes to global state, like like messing up the reducer or however the data is fetched, that's a massive no-no. You don't, like, that is kind of
Yeah,
like how
yeah,
everyone works with that. So you don't touch that. But as far as like whatever piece of work that you're doing, yeah, you can. That's a little bit lenient where you can, like, if that makes more sense to you, then you can do that.
yeah, 100%. Basically, the advice would be, if you're working for somebody, do the things the way they want you to do
Yep.
them, and then your job is going to be easier. And I had this conversation where I like to encapsulate like a lot of my components, and I like to break it out into multiple files, because I hate looking at like 300 lines of code, because to me it just hurts my brain. Where at my job I was like clearly told, don't separate stuff unless it really makes sense. So if this is the only place this is being used, even though you have 300 lines of code, you keep it here. And like I had this conversation twice, and then the third time I just didn't do it, because nothing that happens the third time is good. It's like it's usually bad. So I was like, no, let's not have this like conversation the third time. So if you want a piece of advice, do things the way they want you to do it, especially if you're just starting out. And if you have a better way of doing something, you have to have good reasons and be able to explain them to the person. Because there's like when you work for companies, there's a lot of senior developers who thinks they're like greatest gift from God to the world, and they're right. And so if it's not their way, then like it's the like they're gonna give you hell. And so if you want to have a good piece of advice, just do things the way people expect you to do them. But if you're starting out, like and you're working on a smaller project, and you're like in my case, like I'm working on a project by myself, like I'm just trying to get it to work, make sure that it meets the requirements, and then I go back and try to refactor to see if there's a better way of doing it. But sometimes you don't even know what that is. But usually you might have, like, if you're working at a big company where you have like a mid-level or senior level developers, they're going to have some sort of guide or expectation um, of how they want you to do stuff.
Yeah. And so basically, in a nutshell, I think we can kind of conclude that first of all, when it comes to hooks, there are limitations. You're not gonna like solve, like, you're not gonna just basically throw out the context or redux and then refactor everything in uh, basically hooks, because it's gonna be pain first, and then second, when it comes to like setting everything up, it also, you need to see whether it actually makes sense in a lot of cases if you work as a team to begin with. So I think, yeah. Are you an early bird or no, as far as waking up?
No, like, I mean, sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. Like I said earlier before we started working, like my mom had knee surgery, so I kind of had to help her out with work. And so like I still have like at least 5 hours of work I have to try to do today. So I'm gonna stay up and try to get it done. So uh like I'm a late night bird. But like I want to be a morning bird. It just doesn't work out for me.
No,
So
like we kind of switched because of the kid. The reason why I'm mentioning that, because Alex, I think he's a Terminator. I don't think he ever sleeps.
yeah,
He's
he
like
doesn't sleep. Yeah,
anytime,
he doesn't sleep, Alex.
anytime. Yeah. So by the way, we'll have Alex on. Most likely not next week because we need to still prepare, but I think week after that because I really want to talk to him. But yeah, he's like a warrior, but he also has a 2 year
Yeah.
old. So those
Yeah.
things for me, because my daughter was for 2 years straight, she was waking up at 5 a.m. So you kind of, I realized that there's only so long I can be like tired all day. And then I was like, I'm just gonna go to sleep earlier and then make sure that I get some sleep. Now she sleeps fine finally, but uh, okay, so we have a bunch of things here. Let's go over
Yeah,
this one.
let's go
Hello,
through stuff.
John. Can you make React Redux tutorials before MERN Stack course? So there is no Redux in this one. Now, I don't want to make any promises, but the goal with the MERN was that essentially I made it just because in the Node course people were asking for the front end. So I just thought that I'm just going to combine it. And where I'm going with this, there's going to be more stuff added. But again, I don't give you any timelines just because React is still coming up with an updates. But to kind of give you a hint, I don't see me like recording a bunch of new courses. It's going to be more like adding to the projects to existing ones. We might, I might go with the Next.js, I might go with Pern, but again, I'm not going to switch to Python, for example. So what I'm saying is there's going to be more stuff added, but it's going to be simultaneously with Node. Let's say I'll upload the backend to the Node course, and then I'll add the MERN one to the front end. So that way we can combine the both of them. So they're like that way the people who are going through the Node course, they can see how the front end works. Because what I've noticed, it's really at some point, if you have a bigger Node project and if you're just doing the Postman all the time, I mean, you can do it. You can definitely make the API and everything's fine, but I think it's much more easier to understand the kind of lot, especially when you start dealing with cookies, for example, right? I mean, you don't see it in a browser, and it's kind of, so there is no Redux. I will add Redux once I update React course.
Don't
Because
you have a section there with the Redux
yeah,
already
but
though?
I don't have that Redux kit. So you
Oh,
know how,
toolkit. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So I want to add that one to kind of to
yeah.
so
Toolkit
people
is
see.
cool. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Have you
tried it
used
once.
it?
I
Yeah.
tried it once, but once I started using GraphQL, there hasn't been reason to use Redux because GraphQL has its own store. So like I haven't had reason to use Redux um, at all at this point. But yeah, Redux, like I feel like my stance on Redux, like I think like if people are asking about Redux just because it's cool, that's the wrong like like way to go about it. Like if you don't know a context API, if you can't work with regular React yet, there's no reason for you to learn Redux. And we talked about this before. Like my friend always says, if you don't know the problem Redux is solving, then you don't need it. And so when I
Mm-hmm.
was first learning React, for instance, what messed me up is learning Redux at the same time. Um, but uh, but oddly enough, you know how I got comfortable with Redux is when I saw it implemented in vanilla JavaScript.
Oh.
And people basically it because the point is if you look at Redux GitHub, the code base is very small and it's all vanilla JavaScript. And so basically what the guy did without telling anybody, he rewrote the Redux JavaScript implementation. So then you know what Redux is and how it works, and then and you use it the same way. You have your reducers, you have your actions, whatever. And then he's like, okay, now check this out, we're going to import the Redux library and we're just going to point our code to Redux where we call the all that stuff, and it's still going to work because that's all it is. Under the hood it's just JavaScript that's sort of like global state and like whatever. But that's the time that it made sense to me what Redux was. But seeing it like shown in context of React, you're like, what is happening? Like, I have no idea what it does. And so weirdly, until I saw um, that, like a guy talking about uh, Redux in context of JavaScript, that it made sense. But yeah, if you're
Nope.
just starting out, don't learn Redux. That's basically it.
Yeah. Start with baby steps. For me, I think
Yeah,
I
100%.
started Redux like 4 times. If
Yep.
I'm being
Yep.
perfectly honest, I
Yep.
4 times. Like I started one time, didn't get it. Second time, didn't get it. And yeah, and again, it's the same deal right now. I like when you have some user, like when you have bunch of different data, then it starts to make sense because you need to have some kind of structure. Otherwise, like I just said, even with multiple contexts, it's kind of if you need to start like if they're not communicating with each other, that's fine. If you, let's say you have 50 state values and then you just want to split them up 25 and 25, of course you can split it up in multiple contexts. But the moment you'll start to communicate, that's when you're like, okay, which one I place inside of it so I can access it and blah blah blah. Can you take a look at the comment here that I put on the screen? How would you pronounce the
Hold
name
on a
here.
second.
I don't want to because I'm really
Uh,
bad.
Brian. I say Brian. He's amazing.
Brian.
Yeah, he's a cool dude. I went to school with him.
Oh, because he said that he's in Connecticut and he's going to be watching, so I wanted to do the shout out. So yeah, he
Yeah. I gotta grab lunch with him. I've been meaning to call him, or Brian call me. You know, we have to grab lunch. Yeah, it's
is he
Stoughton in
following
Connecticut.
your is he
Yeah,
following
he. It's funny because we went to community college together, and we
mm,
had like the same class. Oddly enough, it was a public speaking class, and people have no idea that me talking like this to you right now, that's not natural. This is all practice over many years. But I was like really shy. Like I did terrible in that class, even though he says my presentation was good. But I literally had to take a public speaking class in college because I couldn't speak to people publicly. If there's more than two people listening to me, I would go like, and now people like don't believe me. They're like, wow, you must have been like this all the time. Not true at all. But it's funny. He literally was like, oh, I was watching, like, I was thinking of switching careers into web development. I found, your channel. I'm like, wait a second, this guy looks like the guy I went to school with. And sure enough, he's like, hey, did you go to so and so? I'm like, yep. He's like, do you remember me? I'm like, yep. And it's awesome. Yeah,
I
good
do
guy.
have to say that as far as classes, what actually brought me the biggest benefit was the speech class. Like I enjoyed the chemistries, I enjoyed the math. Like that was all like that, I guess, because the fact that I was able to learn that, it kind of transferred more into like, look, if I can study physics for 2, 3 hours, I can definitely do web development. But as far as actually taking something away from the school, that was definitely speech. Where like same as you, the first time I remember I stood there in front of the class and it's like, oh my, like I'm just gonna and then run off, and then you go through the steps that you need to prepare the speech. You need to go through the steps, and it's the same right now. When like I know we have totally two different approaches, and you're way better in speaking in general. But as a side note, Paul he's a free, whatever writer, how you call it. Like I have notes
Yeah,
upon
yeah,
notes
yeah.
upon notes upon
It's
notes,
crazy.
and Paul is just like, "Whoop, I'm gonna do it this way." But
I could talk about nonsense, make no sense for hours, and people would be like, wow, this is amazing. Like, what are you
that is
talking about?
amazing because my wife was
Yeah.
even like, we watched like part of your life, and she's like, "Yeah, he's really good. He can talk for hours and hours." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's why I have him on because he's
My
basically saves me all the time."
yeah. I'm a professional talker.
Yeah.
So the funny story, I used to teach Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and the class would end at night, 9 p.m. And then everybody would circle around, and I would start telling stories, and I'll literally tell stories till 1 a.m. And somebody came up to me like, Paul, you with your stupid stories. Is like another instructor. He's like, all you do is tell stories. I'm like, listen, if people didn't like my stories, they would have left home. But here they are at 1 a.m. listening to the story. And so he used to always make fun of me. But then, like a couple of months later, I see him, class ends, and he starts telling stories. And to me, like, I like it because it reminds me of the time that obviously none of us grew up with, but I'm assuming back in the day when we were like Neanderthals or whatever the hell you call those early humans would sit around like a little fire and grunt at each other. It's that community, that communion. And that's
Mm.
something that I like about talking and telling stories, because I feel like it makes people feel like belonging or something. So to me, and I like talking now, so it's
Jake is asking, Paul, how big are your average projects you work on at work?
oh my goodness. So both companies I worked for, like the first company I worked for was like a hospital EHR management system, and also like it managed not only the workers, not only the hospital, it managed like the patients, their medications, the billing. It was a huge program. Now, I didn't write it myself. I had like a very small sliver of it that I was working on, but it was a huge code base. And like the interesting part about that company, they had a very high turnover. Like every couple of months, they would need to hire some new developers. And like to me, when I saw that, because like they weren't treating developers well enough at my first company, like I was like, that's like the biggest waste of money, because it takes like 3 months, 4 months just to get comfortable with the code base, to know where things are and understand where you're working in. So like that project was huge. And my current job, I started with nothing because I was responsible building this project from scratch, and then now it's getting to a point that it's becoming like its own massive like beast. So like I would say it depends on the company, but most companies, like big companies, you're always working on some sort of massive project. And if it's like a big team, you're working on a very specific part of it. And in my case, where I work for like a small company, but they have like very big ideas. So like me and this other guy, we're responsible for a majority of the code base, and we're getting to a point where it's getting pretty decent size where my boss is like, I might like have to bring in another developer just to make sure that we have enough people working on the code base. So um, unless you're working, I don't know, like most of the projects are like were huge, unless you're doing like small business projects for local like restaurants or something. But that's been my experience.
And to kind of jump on that, did they give you a laptop? That's also something that people are
Yeah, so
asking.
I saw that comment. I was like, man, Alex, I'm gonna send an application where you're working at because I want a laptop. I didn't get no
You
laptop.
didn't get
I
in any of the
no, no,
companies, no.
no, none of the companies that got a laptop. My friend who works at a big company, where he makes tons of money, he got a laptop. So I guess it's based on the company and it's based like the whatever their workflow. Sometimes it's easier for them to set up a laptop for you with all the securities, with all the stuff that you need, and just give it to you. And sometimes they don't.
Mm,
Yep, I'm gonna
uh,
cry now.
I have one for about the courses. For your React course says strong knowledge of JavaScript needed. Can clarify this. I know JS, but not sure if this course is for me. So yeah, I mean it's a little bit kind of not to, I wouldn't say scare people off, but to kind of lay the foundation. Otherwise, there are a bunch of courses, let's say, that say, oh, you don't need to know JS, and I kind of want to distinguish that you do need to know. But with that said, I do have, as I was recording the course, every topic that goes straight up JavaScript, I made a JavaScript Nuggets video. And before the video, during the video, I mentioned the video. Basically, during the React video, I mentioned the JavaScript video. And if you need to brush up and jog your memory, you can go and take a look at the video. And the idea was that I didn't want to spend extra time on going over something JavaScript related because it kind of seemed unfair to people who already know it. So if you know, let's say, what is a variable, if you know what is the function, and again, some really like kind of fundamental things, then you're good to go because you can always reference the JavaScript nuggets, which covers every logic that you'll use as far as just JavaScript.
Yeah, I was gonna say like you have so much amazing content on your YouTube channel that if someone says I don't know where to learn, but I don't want to spend money on a course, like I mean, 9.99 is not that much, but it depends where you live, I guess. But you have so much amazing content on your website. I mean, on YouTube, that if someone just went through that, they would get enough understanding to be able to go through any one of your courses. You know, so
Thank
it's
you,
uh,
thank you.
it's very good. Like, what it's like. What I like is that you just do the stuff that you say you're gonna do. You don't tell stories like some people on YouTube.
We've got any tips to get the most out of your Udemy course? I have JavaScript and React.js. This is also something that we have already talked about, where I always like strongly suggest for me the first step is always try to repeat without going into CSS because you should be focusing on a logic, but try to repeat what you have in front of you. Let's say try to repeat that project that you build, or even the piece of tutorial. Let's say you just learned about use state, try setting it up 5 times or 4 times or whatever, like just to get something going, because it's always very easy as you're watching tutorial, like, oh, I'll always remember this, but you won't. The moment you'll turn off that whatever second laptop or screen or whatever, you will forget about it. And at least for me, every time when I'm learning something, that's what I do. I stop the video and I just like very mechanically like, look, can I do this one feature one time, second time, third time? Then once I'm good to go, then I resume and then I keep going. And with that said, in the beginning it's going to be more. It doesn't mean that you every time will have to redo everything from scratch. And then, like Paul says, if you're watching 7 courses, there's a problem. You know, like 2 3 courses. I mean, even that is like usually even
That's a
one
lot.
course. You know, you need to start building. There's no course will solve stuff. Now you can look for some certain features in the blog post or whatever. Yeah, that's of course like everybody does that when you're looking for something. But in general, you shouldn't be waiting for the course to kind of push you to do something. Like that's the point where you need to start building. Hopefully, this answers. Do you want to add something?
Not to that, but I'm just gonna, be a jerk and read this one. Hello, John. Are you going to do a Next.js course? Just finished your React course and want to build a portfolio with Next.js or Gatsby. And not like I actually don't want you to do a Next.js code. I even have a better idea for you. You should do a course on Koa.js.
Core, that's the new one, I assume. There's some
Well, Koa.js is basically take Express. I just learned this, by the way. Don't think I'm some sort of expert. Take Express and get rid of like majority of the stuff, and then you'll have Koa.js, which is like much thinner uh, API building library based on Express or built by the same people. But the only reason I tell you this is because guess who uses Koa.js?
mm,
Strappy.
okay,
Strappy uses
under the
Koa.js
hood. Oh
under the
wow.
hood. Yes, and there's a reason because they have this paradigm where everything is a sync await, and
Hmm.
it makes it easier, like in terms of like there's no callback hell and the way they like handle stuff. Because I looked at Koa and I was like, oh, this looks very similar to the
Read
code I'm
Alex's
writing.
comment. He just commented. His last comment.
Alex, I'm gonna get in touch with you because I think your hate may be misguided, and I'm gonna help you to see the beauty of Koa,
He's
and we could talk
Alex. He's
about it.
gonna help you to see the light at the
But
end.
that's true. But Alex is right. There is no real content on it, and I think like regardless if you hate it or not, like I'm sure Koa, like in Strappy, there's a reason why they use it, and I think why is because the way it gives you context, which has everything in it, and you're able to pass stuff like very easily. That's one of the things. And Alex correctly, because I totally wrong, because all I know about Koa is how to make basic hello world with it. But I am interested in it, so I might have to call you and ask questions when I get stuck, Alex. So fantastic. Yeah,
As far as like again, this is still in the stages I'm thinking about like making just a tutorial as far as Next.js in the beginning, and that one I might put on YouTube just as a tutorial. I'm thinking about it. It's still in the process. We'll see. It depends. If React is gonna come out with the update right now, then no, because it's kind of a waste of my time because I know that the moment React update is going to come out, Next.js update is going to come out eventually, and then all
yeah.
of that content is pretty much for nothing.
I mean, what I would say, like, if you had time in terms of like the courses that you have, maybe forget about Gatsby and what other JS library that was. I don't remember what was it called.
Svelte, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
forget
that
about
one.
that
Yeah,
for
no,
now
no,
for a little bit.
it's
Uh,
it.
but but I think like what I like about your courses, and then I'll say like if you were to add a course, Next.js would make sense, but with a caveat being what I like about your courses, they're always up to date. And I remember I took your React course like so long ago that was all class based. And then next time I opened your course, which was funny because it was like when I was trying to learn about hooks, and I was like, I wonder if John has any hook stuff. And like the whole course was done with hooks and with all the brand new features. And I think like there's a lot of people that just release bunch of courses, but it's one thing to have bunch of courses or have up to date most recent courses. That's honestly one of the reasons I keep coming back to your courses is because they're up to date. And
Yeah,
I think I
yeah,
like that. So if you had to sacrifice and be like, oh, I can't put time to make a Next.js course because React, whatever, is going to come out with its new features, I'm all for that because I much rather have the new up to date stuff so I could increase my React knowledge. But if you do find time eventually, Next.js, I think, would be like right, like would make sense. Like if I were told someone what to learn, I would say HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, Next.js. That's it.
Yeah,
That
no,
would be a lot of
I
that. But
100% like
and
Next.js
then
is
no.
definitely something that I enjoy. First of all, like working myself, but it comes really down to like what Paul is saying. I don't want to have like 50,000 of them, and then it's all it was made like five years ago or whatever. And there's gonna be some like tough decisions. The moment SvelteKit is out, pretty much the Svelte course goes out the window. And as far as Gatsby, I also like personally, I'm not like. I understand they need to make money. I get it, but it seems to me that there's a lot of like push for the Gatsby cloud, which becomes like then I'm not really talking about the technology anymore. It's more like, hey, this is how you click the button. This is how you deploy the site, and that's not what I want to do. So I know that Next.js is like pretty much tied to the like what's the Vercel or like what that's
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
company,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So I get it. I'm not being naive, but I still like I don't know. Like we'll see. We'll see how Gatsby does. But
Yeah, and that,
yeah, sorry.
yeah, and of course Koa tutorial like Alex says also as well. I
There's
think you
also
need a
what is
Koa.
that? The happy there is happy
You don't need happy
happy.
JS. You don't need
I
it. It's
well yeah.
we got strappy. We don't need happy. You know what I mean? We need
If it was up to you, I would be doing GraphQL Strappy, and by the way, when you talk to
with
Strappy
Koa and
and
Postgres. That's what
Koa
she would be doing.
and
Koa,
Postgres,
GraphQL,
yeah.
Postgres. Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
by
yeah.
the way, when you talk to Strappy, ask them when they will update the Gatsby plugin because I have in a Gatsby course, people are complaining that they cannot access the
First of all, like
data.
this is one like okay, I'm gonna say this. Okay, there are a lot of people like Strappy 4 just came out, literally just came out, and bunch of people already jumping in and doing Strappy 4. I'm like, it just came out. When MacBook came out with the new OS, like I updated it on day one and it broke my MacBook, and that's from Apple. Like if Apple can't release something that doesn't have bugs, like when Strappy comes out brand new, like of course there's going to be bugs. It's only been out for like a week, 2 weeks, but like everybody's jumping to Strappy 4, and then as soon as they switch to it, first of all, it's different enough that you do need to know the Strappy 4 way of doing certain things. But two, it's like it just came out. Like it doesn't have all the things implemented, like where Strappy 3 been around forever. There's all these plugins, all these things you could use that are battle tested. But it's funny to me, people like already complain about Strappy 4. I'm like, it's only been out for like a little bit. Give it a break. Let people like catch up and figure out. But
No, no,
that's
no.
one
That
thing.
like basic. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
Uh,
Basic. It's
yeah,
not. Ah, sorry. Yeah, keep talking. Sorry.
yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, for them the issue is that anyway, and there's a question actually in this one. Have you like, I know for sure that you're using GraphQL as far as how the data is leaving the Strappy, but have you pulled it ever in Gatsby or no? Because this is something that I'll have to
So
do
yeah,
anyway.
so I didn't use Gatsby, and like come back to your thing. I know there was like a plugin for Gatsby with Strappy that a lot of people use. And so I haven't used it, but what I was gonna say, like that's one kind of downfall of Strappy for particular things. If they decide not to support certain thing, like you kind of like have to implement it either yourself or kind of be like, oh, I don't know what to do. And um, like Gatsby, but I'm sure like I haven't done Gatsby,
But
but I'm sure they have a Gatsby like starter Strappy project. I'm sure
well,
there's one
here's the
out there.
thing. So the issue is very simple. When you set up the content type with whatever data, it's not pulling in the image. So this is what I'm done with Mern course,
Mm.
and now I'll have to switch back and I'll have to add additional video. So the reason why I'm asking is because this is how I'm gonna spend my weekend probably, and I need to figure out how to pull in the actual that you can get all the images, but I don't want all the images. I want the one that's actually associated with a content type. That's all.
So yeah, the one interesting thing is that kind of like something that I was uh noticing. So actually, I'm like looking Gatsby source Strappy, Gatsby's that
Because when I
plugin.
checked last time, the I could see that the plugin hasn't been updated. And again, this is not me complaining about them, whatever. Of course, I totally understand that. I was just like, I know
I
that you.
wonder if there's a bunch of different ones. Maybe there's another one you could use, but like
I was hoping that there's a way. If remember, because when we had the Strappy interview, he said that you essentially you set it up as GraphQL on a Strappy, and then but I
so
didn't. kind of.
So here's the thing. So I used, and like Gatsby, like I haven't used, so I have no idea how they do stuff with Gatsby. But I created Next.js application which was pulling data with images via GraphQL. But then I'm using Apollo uh, client on the Next.js side of things, and or I'm using something else. I forgot what I'm using. It was like a while ago. But pulling images works. So it's probably something you write with the Gatsby plugin. Or you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and say something's wrong with Gatsby. I'm gonna say it's not Strappy's fault. It's not Strappy's fault at all.
It's
It's
not.
Gatsby,
It can
obviously.
never be Strappy. And
It's
on that,
not.
and actually, do you do you see how like every time we end up on a Strappy? I like this. I like how we always end up on a Strappy. And with that note, yes, it's 7:13, so we have been 1 hour 13, and it looks like I need to
Nice.
put my daughter to sleep. So as always, massive, 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 massive thank you to Paul for taking time in his like extremely busy schedule. I know how busy he is, so that's why I'm really, really grateful. And that's why, if you want to see some great content, not some clickbait BS, go to his channel, Coding After 30. He does awesome live streams where he is creating the project, where he just spends 2 hours talking about his journey, like what steps he took, any kind of advice or whatever. What was the 90-day fiance, whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
Basically,
yeah.
you'll get a bunch of cool, good info, useful info, and you'll have a good time. And for me, like, thanks to everyone who, again, as always, joined us. Like, this is, I liked how Alex put it. He's like, I was talking to Alex on Twitter, and he's like, yeah, this is more for me like a night out with the guys. And
That,
this is
yeah, exactly.
this
Yeah,
is
that's
not
what's
to say
fun.
that girls cannot. What I'm saying, with like-minded people,
Yeah.
spend some time, just talk about stuff that we're interested in. It doesn't really matter like how many views it gets or whatever. It's more about
So
like the people we spend. Yeah.
the interesting thing I want to add, like I love having our conversations, and like again, it could be guys, it could be girls. It's just talking about like-minded individuals who want to talk about the things that they're interested in. So I've been in a bunch of conversations on Twitter, and I've been like, and I'm not saying it's everybody, but it seems like I don't know what you would call it, virtual signaling or check out how cool I am, but everybody like talks a certain way that like if we met in person you wouldn't talk like that. You'd sound like a freaking idiot, you know what I mean? Like you're it's like check out how cool I am giving you advice and like blah, it's like
Mm.
I don't know like if you ever experienced that like on Twitter, like the audio of like whatever hangouts, or I don't know what the hell they call it, but it's like it's almost like it's about tech, but the conversation is about like not tech. If like I don't know how to explain it. It's like I don't know. It's like very pretentious. It's like like I imagine if we were like super rich at a tea party talking nonsense. That's what it is to
Yeah.
me. Like so pretentious, and that's why I love coming on to like talking to you because I just come on and I just talk to you like if we had no camera and I was sitting like in your living room across from
Mm.
you, this
Mm.
would be the same conversation we would be
Yeah. Then
like
it would.
having. And this is what I like about the everybody that joins us here is that it's be basically talk to you like as we were sitting in your room, real people. Like I don't need to make you like me more. And
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care. I just wanna
Yeah.
talk
It's
about the things that I want to talk about with people that I like. That's it.
mm.
And this is
Mm.
why like I'm really happy that we connected and all the awesome people that join us in the chat because that's how I look at it. Yeah, but always fun time.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you everyone for coming. Again,
Thanks
we
everyone.
will
Happy New
be,
Year's for all of you
yeah,
guys.
yeah, hopefully all your New Year's resolutions come through. We will be on Fridays at 6 o'clock Pacific time from now on. And I already think that we were way more active because we were not half asleep, both of us. So awesome. Awesome. See you next time, everyone.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
guys have a good one.
See
Bye.
ya.